Hi, and welcome to Manifest in a Participatory Universe. Chapter 1, The Universe and the Frequencies of Energy, where we learn that we are part of everything. Now, we should know that, right? But where does that actually start? Well, let's start with some basic geometry. First, there's a point. And a point can be pretty much anything, but a point, for our purposes, what I want you to do is think of a point as a dot, just a single dot. And that point could be a point in time. And the thing about a point in time is it can be an hour, it can be a minute, it can be a second, it can be half a second, it can be a nanosecond. All of those are a point based on how you look at it and the scale from which you approach it, right? But a point is a single placement, a single dot. Like on this screen, in space, a point can be large, it can be small, it can be a circle, it can be a square, it can be anything, but you're looking for one single thing. Just a mere, drop, just a point, something fun and point, that's it. Then I want you to think about the idea of a line, okay? We've got lines all around us, lines around a mirror, lines around frames, lines. And in geometry, a line is an interesting thing because a line connects several points. In fact, it kind of passes through them and it keeps on going. A line is really just a place where this thing, it's two-dimensional, right? But it keeps on going. Time is a line. It began somewhere in the future, it keeps going, and we live along a point, the now, along this line of time. In space, a line can connect us to the sun, a line can connect us to the moon, a line can connect through us, through any of those, depending on how it orients, right? And really, as we look at lines and we kind of say, okay, well, that's us. Let's say this is time. That's us. That's now. But at any point along that, if we zoom in close enough on that line, it's just a bunch of points all put together. It's just snapshots all the way along it, right? Next, I want you to think of a plane. Now, not this kind of plane. I want you to think of this kind of plane. Now, this is interesting because a plane, if we're thinking of a two-dimensional shape and we're looking down at it, then it's rectangular, right? That's what we do in our heads. We kind of give it dimensioning. We give it shape so that we can think about it. If we're thinking about a picture frame or a television, that's a big frame, or windows, boxes of any kind. These are all planes, when we're looking in two-dimensional space. There's just this rectangular shape. But when we put it at an angle, we're looking at this flat thing that goes off in space somewhere, right? And the thing about a plane in geometry, the way that they look at it, is that it holds no depth whatsoever, but it extends infinitely in, all four directions, basically. It covers everything. It covers everything in all directions except deep. It doesn't go deep. So we're just two-dimensional planes. And the thing about planes is that they're made up of lines. Okay? So at any given point, if we are taking this idea of this plane is infinity, and we're going to say, okay, along this side of it, we have lines. And then we just start laying them in. And here's all these lines. And really, mathematically, what we're looking at is an infinite number of lines on that plane. And that's what builds that plane. And within each of those lines, we've got an infinite number of points that build it up. So really, what we're looking at is this whole idea of two-dimensional space. Everything is a point, a line, somewhere on this plane. So let's mix it up a little bit. Okay, three-dimensional world. In a three-dimensional world, or a three-dimensional universe, how's that? Let's look at a little bit bigger. In a three-dimensional universe, we've got the cube, right? Now, it helps me to picture it as a cube because I can see where a line might be, where a plane might be, But it doesn't have to be a cube. It could be a sphere, if that helps you picture things better. It could be a cylinder. It can be an egg. Honestly, I think the most radical version of the universe that I have understood is that it's a dragon. You know, a dragon where inside, in this black space of the dragon, is all of the universe. And it doesn't matter what shape goes into it, it just is all of the universe. The universe is a dragon. But we're going to simplify, because it's really up to you if you choose to believe the dragon or not. I like the cube because it's simple. I can see it in space. And like I said, I can divide it. Here's a plane going in the cube. Now, the plane has no depth. So really, when we're looking at the depth of this thing top to bottom, we're talking about infinite numbers of planes in that space. Okay? And along that line, here's a line. So there's a line that goes through this plane in three-dimensional space, and it extends forever. And inside of that is a point, is a bunch of points, okay? So the idea here is that when we start looking at the universe just from a very broad idea here of geometry, we have three-dimensional space, we have two-dimensional planes, we have two-dimensional lines, we have points that don't even occupy dimensional space. It's just a point sort of idea, right? It's just a thing that's there. So that's the foundation that we're going to start building on now. And then we're going to jump into some physics. You know, you might know waves from trips to the beach, but waves are deeply ingrained in the foundation of the universe. So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about energy as a wave, because waves are so repetitive when we examine all of the different signatures of energy throughout the universe. So here's the thing about the waves. Let's go ahead and take a look at our cube here. And we say, okay, we have the plane within infinity, right? This cube represents infinity. It's all of the energy in all of the universe that ever is, ever will be. It's infinity. But we're just going to go ahead and put it in a box because that's something we can understand. Now, where this plane is a certain level of infinity. And in that plane, there is a line. We are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, defining a point in infinity. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And when we zoom in, we see, okay, well, there's our line now. We can see it. And there's a point there, so that's awesome. And then we zoom in a little bit more and we start to see, okay, well, there's the points all along that line. And we zoom in a little bit more and we can say, okay, it's interesting because the points have a little bit of wiggle here. What are we measuring? Are we looking at matter? Are we looking at energy? What are we actually looking at? And then we zoom in closer and we say, okay, there is obviously some form going on here, and it is very obviously a wave. So then we have to say, okay, we're smart. You know, we've looked at electrical waves, we've looked at gravity waves. You know, the world is always constantly measuring all these waves, and we say that there is a thing called frequency. Then this thing called frequency travels in waves, and it has a shape, and there's all sorts of different shapes. Don't let people tell you that they have to look like this or they have to look like that, because they look like lots of different forms. And some of them are more flat, some of them are round, some of them are angular, square. You know, I'm just giving you real highlights here so you kind of understand the concepts that we're going to be talking about. And with the frequency, what we've got is certain measurements. We have the amplitude so that we can understand how high or how distinct each of these high parameters or low parameters are from the center. We have, of course, the wavelength, which is how long it takes to complete one cycle of that wave. And then we have the parts of it, the crest and the trough. And what we see when we zoom in on these theoretical lines and points, what we see is that along the frequency, here's all of the different points that we were tracking. Here's all the different ideas that we were looking at. And what we see at any point of these frequencies are what's hitting us, what we're measuring right this minute, what is happening in the now. You know, the time that you are experiencing it in the moment is the point that your senses literally experience that wave, that piece of the wave. You know, think about your life. Are there maybe times where you could almost feel a shift in something going on or feel a shift in the energy around you? What does that look like? Well, I'll tell you. Frequency is vibration. So if you feel things or hear things vibrating, that's a sort of frequency that's setting something off, right? A frequency is energy whose wave vibrates with a certain amplitude, right? A certain up and down and a certain wavelength. And those affect what happened with the energies around that frequency. Frequency has like a charge. If you've heard of the law of attraction, if you've heard like attracts like, certain frequencies create these resonance that attract. And if we're talking about charge, of course, electrical frequency is the perfect example of something that has charge. Alternating currents and direct currents are both ways of transmitting the charge through electrical waves. And of course, frequency is light. We've all experienced light. We live in the sun. But when we get down close, what we see is that cells give off light. Plants give off light. We can't see it because our brains just don't see it. We're not really programmed to see it. We have all these tools that we've invented so that we can measure and see all the smallest pieces. And then when we get really sophisticated, we can see that everything is giving off light. Atoms give off light. Molecules give off light. Just because we can't see it with the naked eye doesn't mean it isn't there. And within our environment here, within the Earth's atmosphere, where there's oxygen and pressure that can reverberate with it, frequency is sound, right? There's certainly sound and higher pitch that we can hear with the human ear and lower pitch that we can't hear at all, but frequency is sound. And it's super important to understand that these sounds, in our understanding of it, play a super important part with how we perceive the world around us. The other thing we should look for are fields, because fields are an effect of the vibration of waves. The interplay of positive and negative, the crest and the trough of when the wave is reverberating with the frequency, it creates a force that affects other charges in the field, and it attracts or it repels them. If you've ever done the experiment where you rub your hands together really fast for like 30 seconds and then hold them about a foot apart, kind of let your fingers just relax, let your hand relax, and just kind of hold them back and forth in circles, and you can feel a kind of energy there, okay? That's what I'm talking about. That's a field effect of some kind going on, and fields are something that happen just with energy. It's something we need to understand, that this is a naturally occurring thing. So this gives you the basic foundation for what we're going to go over in the next few chapters of this. The universe is infinite, and it sits inside the body of a dragon, or a cube, or a circle, or something else, but let's go with the dragon. In the dragon, we find a single unique point out of infinite points. When we look at this point, sitting in the heart of a dragon, perhaps, when we look at it, it's probably a wave, because the universe, our dragon, is all energy in various forms. If our dragon and all her wave-like frequencies are infinite, why would anybody think that our limited perception of everything is truly everything? How very important are we, right? Throughout history, we've seen it. The limitations on what we know. Turning points, where a world which once was flat is now round. The moon can't be reached until it was. Do you think the ancient Grecians would flip their lid if they knew that? What I'm asking you now to believe is that everything in our universe is energy. And at a fundamental level, it's all different energy frequencies. And we don't even realize how much we don't observe, feel, and miss. Now, in a big way, this is kind of quantum theory, right? This is just the theory of all the little quantum. Quantum is a measurement of the tiniest particles of things. That's the smallest thing we can measure. And really, that's what a lot of this is quantum understanding. What we call matter is energy in very low states of vibration. Their frequency is very low. Vibration is part of energy. Energy is vibration. It all vibrates, right? So what vibrates? Well, let's go back to our cube. We're going to imagine one line in the subatomic energy of the universe. Now, there's a lot of subatomic energy out there. Even whatever they tell you is dark or empty might have something in it, because we don't perceive 96% of what's out there. We're just guessing. So what we're going to do is we're just going to draw a line and say, that's the subatomic energy. Then we're going to go ahead and add another line that intersects the first. So boom, okay? Now, what this has done is put a giant cross right through the middle of the universe. We're saying all of these, right? So that's not enough. We need to go ahead and locate one more. Let's go ahead and do that. And then all of a sudden what we've got is a point, okay? But it's still not enough to understand the idea of subatomic energy that I want to share with you. When we add a few more lines, we're getting there, okay? Imagine this is all the intersecting frequencies from all the intersecting angles throughout the energy universe. If I drew it here, it'd look like a dark circle, so crossing a bunch of lines gets the idea across. Now, about where they are is a zone of frequency that we can kind of identify. And if all of these things are crossing in there and all of them are different frequencies and waves, what do we get? We get something that looks kind of like this, right? I mean, everything's going. In that zone, we can guess at the intersecting wave patterns and varieties. Notice that not every wave passes through the exact center, right? Why do we sometimes have a hard time determining whether things are waves or particles? Because if everything is moving in this form and everything is moving in some form, it may not ever pass through an exact center. Now, if we kind of remember the idea of sound and frequencies, then each wave passing through this zone here that we've marked out in the universe is kind of like a pitch. So I just want you to imagine that each one of these is a pitch, and each one of these is sort of harmonic and working together as a unified hum. So it's like different instruments playing for the band, right? Every instrument is important to make the sound the right sound. And the bigger the band that you've got, the more that it all kind of pulls together, as long as everybody's doing their part. So if we look at that zone of frequency and imagine it like a band, then it sort of has its own vibration, right? Different bands have different sounds, they have different feels, they even have different songs that kind of throw off some of that feel. And as we zoom in on that, we can see waves deeper and deeper and deeper, right? That's that infinite thing. We can actually zoom in and see, okay, well, that breaks apart to 4 more waves of that and 3 more waves of the other thing, going all these different angles through the universe. So it's just imagine 3D space and everything is passing through that spot that can. So we're just going to zoom out a little bit and say, okay, the subatomic energy in that spot has a frequency sort of like this. That's what we're going to go ahead and imagine. Now, I'm not sure we can consider that frequency the average of everything as much as it is just the moment of frequencies coming together, but it certainly has a cumulative effect, like a band. Now, if we take this and we say, what if we move out a little bit further? You know, maybe some of these zones of frequency, some of these, averaged ideas of frequency, maybe they start to resemble one another and group together. That's cool, right? And we understand that those areas become attracted to each other. They start to vibrate, they start to hum, they start to have a sound as a band. And so, maybe all the hard rock all go together, and the marching bands all go together. And they kind of they work with each other. And remember, it's just a bunch of vibrating energy. It crisscrosses and doesn't actually have any solidity whatsoever, because it's in constant flux, and it moves beyond this zone of influence. It goes off into eternity. It's only here at the moment that we are observing it in any way that it sort of does anything where it looks like this, where it's captured within a zone of frequency. So then if we think about that, and then those other ones grouping together, like a bunch of these grouping together, and we take it out even further beyond that, then we sort of have something like subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, electrons. The step below this would be all the things that those are made of. The step below that would be like more of the vibrations that just happen to be existing and crossing together to create the energy that builds quarks and anti-quarks that go into the subatomic particles. And then we take it bigger, right? So then we've got atoms, which every time we look at it in science, they teach it to kids, and you say, here's a model of an atom, and you pick up a plastic thing and you kind of flip it around and you're like, yeah, that's cool. But when we look at them, when we actually photograph them, and with our technical, magical equipment, they're clouds, right? They're mostly empty. It's things moving so fast and energy moving so fast and popping in and out of existence that it's just zones of particular frequencies. And we take a bunch of those and we put them together, and it's beautiful and complex. We get molecules that start having affect other places and combining to make elements. Or the elements make molecules. So we keep growing and we keep getting bigger and bigger. Next we get to cells, right? And it becomes our choice whether to accept our fundamental structures. Are we actually made of atoms? Are we made of elements and molecules? Are we just these physicality in and of itself? And of course, you pack a bunch of those together and you get organs. Every organ in your body has pieces that tell it how to work and how to function, and those are driven by the smaller building blocks that come up to it. You gather enough of those together, you've got systems in the body. Systems interact to keep us moving forward towards survival. And that way, we're no different than any other creature we know of. But then there's something more with us. Something turns on. It's a small miracle, right? The brain reaches a platform of understanding in relation to the world outside our skin, and then learns to interact with it. Now, the same can be said of cats. The same can be said of plants. But we've got something special that turns on that allows us to think differently and to communicate differently. We learn that working together helps us survive longer. To work together effectively, we form patterns and behaviors. We form cultures, communities, and tribes to support one another, to divide work, to make sure that we can all cooperate. That lets us build bigger and faster. Like any frequency, we can still keep zooming out. One piece of a much larger whole, which is different than the sum of its parts. Societies can come together, and we've got planets. Can you see how the shape of the frequency changes as we move up the spectrums? How big does it go? People to communities, societies, planets, galaxies. At each stage, the parts are still there. When we look in closer, the parts are still there. In fact, they actually start to resemble one another in some effect. Flowers and galaxies and light and waves and all these different ideas. At each stage, though, the whole is different than the sum of its parts. It's not an exact replica. It's the formula, the same base idea formulas applied slightly differently and built differently because it's built of all the frequencies within it. And if we go out beyond that, I mean, maybe it keeps going. Maybe it keeps changing form. Maybe the shape of the universe is just recycling itself as it goes larger and larger and larger of vibrations, each level influencing the next. And all of us just doing our part to help the band. You know, we've got the subatomic band. Maybe you on a cellular level, you're a ragtime ditty. And because of that, on the outside, your life is a rock show. Whatever your jam, from all the stuff you're made of, to all the stuff and all the people you interact with, something you need to understand is out of all this infinity, you are a frequency, and I am a frequency, and everyone around us is a frequency. High level, low level, and everything in between. Each of us is a chorus, not just an instrument, but an entire chorus of vibrations and energy moving through us, to us, with us every single day, influencing all of us around us. Each of us is a melodic sensation of energy. Each of us is a frequency. And the reason we can get societies together and we can get tribes together is because we start to resonate with the frequencies that are us, that are similar to us. When somebody is like us, we go, ah, you are like me. We behave the same. We understand things the same. When we get together with friends and family, we expand the entire understanding of frequency because we are all similar, each of us different within those frequencies. But when we come together, we can bond into one larger frequency, right? We shift, we reciprocate in a way that creates harmonic alignments between who we are. We become frequency together. Of course, as a whole, our world has a frequency. The earth, the ground, the sky, the air, the radio waves that we blast all over the place, the Wi-Fi, cats, dogs, chimpanzees, plants, us, buildings, they all have frequency. And when it's all taken together, one big frequency, where is there anger, war, famine, fires, and hurt? Where is there abundance and gratitude? You don't see any of it when we look at the world as a frequency. What we see is higher or lower. Are we looking at it simply from the state of the material world and the solid things that it is? Because that's the lower state. That's lower. If we're looking at it for the energy that we bring and everything we try to do, we raise energy levels beyond the physical. Now, I believe it all adds up to something. We should all be allowed to come to our conclusions on these things. But if there is a frequency for everything, infinite frequencies multiplied in infinite space, and on each scale of energy, it adds up to something different than the sum of its parts. The frequency for us is different than the frequency for the entire planet. But the entire planet's frequency includes us. Our frequency, your frequency, includes your cells, includes the atoms within those cells, includes the electrons that sometimes pop in and out of existence within those cells. What level would we need to climb to find the collective energy of all conscious thought? If everything is a frequency, and all frequencies together create one kind of harmonized frequency, what is the energy of collective thought? What level might lie beyond that? Well, I don't know, but here's something I do know for sure. We only perceive a very small part of it. Part of that is by design, by the human design, by our body's design. Part of that's by training, by bringing people up a certain way to see, to observe, to believe certain things. And part of that's by choice. We choose not to be influenced by more than we think we can handle. We choose to cut out frequencies that may benefit us. We choose to indulge in frequencies that may not benefit us. That seems like a shame, doesn't it? So I'm just going to give you a quick summary here. The universe is a dragon. The dragon contains infinite energy. Maybe when invisible energy frequencies collide, they form the basic building blocks of everything. And as they collide and as they connect and build and grow and circle and do the things that they do, it has a frequency. Together, they have a frequency. And those frequencies build and grow and attract and build and grow and attract. And at each stage, it appears at different scales. So the assignment for the first chapter is I want you to answer the questions that are written below. These are questions like, what do I want for my future? What do I want to be doing? What do I want to own? What do I want to wear? What do I want to look like? When you answer these questions, you start to get a picture, okay? And I want you to imagine big. It doesn't do any good to imagine small. Imagine big. Imagine grand things. And write out the answers. Write them out completely. Take sheets of paper, multiple sheets of paper. And then when you're done, when you look at those, I want you to go online and find images that match your imagination. Don't be constrained by, what you've been in the past or what you think is your reality. Use Google and just go to town. It helps if you can find images that are large because of what we're going to do with them. And there's plenty of places you can find, but they don't have to be large. If you understand what they are, then that's great. But I want you to literally find pictures to match the answers that you give. Answer the questions first. Don't just jump online and start looking, because the way that the brain works is you're going to find things that appeal to you now, but may not have relevance to what you're trying to build. So answer the questions first, and then go looking for some pictures. And I'll catch up with you in chapter 2.